meeting of the Albemarle County Planning Commission. I will start by calling us to order. May we have the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Moore, Mr. Missile, I'm sorry,
Here.
Mr. Murray,
Here.
Mr. Bivens,
Here.
Mr. Carazana,
Here.
Ms. Firehawk,
Here.
and Mr. Claiborne and Mr. Moore are both absent.
Great, thank you. Moving on to item number 2, the consent agenda. Would any commissioners like to pull any of these items for further review? If not, could I hear a motion?
I move that we adopt the consent agenda.
We have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Only thing I will add is that it was a pleasure to see that what we're looking at is what we asked them to do when they came before us. It was like, how lovely that they did the thing that we asked them to do.
Great, thanks. Any other discussion? Okay, may we have the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Moore,
He's not here.
Mr. Murray, I'm
Here.
sorry. Mr. Bivens,
Yes, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sleepy.
Better wake up over there.
I know.
You better wake up.
Mr. Bivens, did he say yes?
I said,
I'm sorry.
I said yes.
Mr.
Yeah.
Missile,
Yes.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
and Ms. Firehawk.
Yes.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, we will now move to the highlight of the show, the work session on affordable housing, and I will turn it over to staff for the presentation. Could I ask,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, could I just ask kind of an opening question to sort of help frame expectations a little bit? Because oftentimes, we'll have work sessions where you all start off with, these are the things we'd like feedback on. Is this more of a briefing on a current status? Okay, and
Correct.
how much of the briefing is about the current sort of status of affordable housing versus the work being done to support affordable housing initiatives in the county?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. All yours.
Thank you.
And before you start, I just say, again, just for your benefit, those folks who might be listening, I think this was a reaction to your all's request for more information
Right.
about just various, efforts that the county's making about affordable housing. I knew it was front and center, so we started with this one, and we'll try and do some other ones for you.
Great.
We have holes on the agenda.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Stacy Pethiat, Assistant Director of Housing, and I'm here to give you an update on Housing Albemarle, so the housing policy and activities that have happened since its adoption in 2021. We will start with just a brief overview of what exactly affordable housing is, how we measure it, what we mean by that, and then who qualifies to live in affordable housing. So I'm trying to move this closer so I'm clean in weird ways. And then looking at the housing needs in in Albemarle County, and that's really based on that 2019 Regional Housing Needs Assessment that was completed by the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership. And then look at the county response to date. So when we talk about affordable housing, we're really talking about housing that an individual or family can afford with the income they have. It's really that simple. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development recommends housing costs no more than gross household income, so pre-tax income. And that really includes, if you're a renter, that includes your monthly rent and the amount you pay for utilities each month. And for homeowners, that's the monthly mortgage payment, including your principal and interest, property taxes and mortgage insurance, if that is required for your mortgage, as well as the utilities that you pay. And really that 30% was, I believe, set in the 1980s. And it's really designed to leave room to pay for housing, but also cover other essentials such as food and healthcare, transportation costs, et cetera. There are several ways that we can measure affordability, and the first is the fair market rent. And this is set by, again, HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, each year. It's really based on the 40th percentile rents in a metropolitan area. So for us, it covers Albemarle County, the city of Charlottesville, Greene County, Nelson County, and Fluvanna County. And so in 2025, HUD set the fair market rents, so for a two-bedroom apartment at $1,729 a month. And if you compare that to the average rents for apartments in April of 2025, a two-bedroom was at that point renting for about $1,900 a month. So they're set at a lower level than what market rate rents would typically choose. I will say that in Albemarle County, the Office of Housing actually increases our fair market rents or the voucher payment standard for our Housing Choice Voucher Program at 110% of this fair market rent. Because the rents are so high, families are having difficulty finding places to use their vouchers.
Can I interrupt? I'm sorry, one
Yep.
question. Do you prefer us waiting till the end to ask questions, or do you want us to interrupt you throughout?
1 second, I have a restarting now, not now. Feel free to ask whenever, that's fine.
Okay, I just had a question on that previous slide.
Yep.
Overall, I guess the trends, it's increasing, right? The costs are
correct.
increasing. Have you seen, is it a steady increase? Has that 110 also increased? Are there aspirational goals for that to change, or what's kind of the,
Ideally, our voucher payment standards would be set at the fair market rent. So we would love to see that $1,729 a month as our maximum assistance level. That way we'd be able to assist more people. So the higher we have to set our voucher payment standards, the fewer people we can serve. We are given a limited budget each year and told how many vouchers HUD believes that will serve. And then it really depends on the market as to whether or not we can meet that goal that they gave us. So we would like to see the rents go down. Looking at more recent data, rents about different bedroom sizes are going up and down at different rates. So there have been some decreases, I believe, in two-bedroom rent since a year ago, but not significant changes.
because there's more available? Yeah, so that's a.
Oh, yeah. So have there, tell me a little bit more about vacancy rates for apartments. Has that changed over time?
It's still pretty low. It's hovering around 2 or 3%. So it's definitely below 5. Ideally, vacancy rates for rents or for all housing units would be around the 5% mark. And that allows room for movement within the housing market. When it gets down below 5%, particularly around 2%, that's when we really start to see housing prices rise considerably and quickly because there's just not enough housing to meet demand. Another way to measure housing affordability is what we all in the housing industry like to call the housing wage. And that represents the hourly wage a full-time worker must earn in order to afford to rent a modest two-bedroom apartment. So a modest two-bedroom apartment would be that $1,729 a month at the fair market rent level. So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, according to the fair market rent, a household would need to, a single worker would need to earn $33.25 an hour in order to afford comfortably that $1,729 a month with their utilities. Based on Bureau of Labor Statistics data, about 25% of households, workers in the county have income less than the housing wage. So that's about 20% of our households do not earn enough to afford that $1,729 a month. And if you look at the number of hours, an employee who earns minimum wage, which I believe is $12 an hour currently in Virginia, they would need to work 107 hours a week just to meet that $1,729 a month, making sure it's 30% of their income.
And that $33.25 is based on a 40-hour week?
That's correct.
Like it was in the neighborhood of a $68,000 a year salary.
It's more than that.
I got, if you work 20, 50 hours a year, 68, 367 is what I got.
Multiplied by 2,000.
Yeah.
Not a lot of jobs around here that pay that much.
So moving on to who lives in affordable housing. Affordable housing is really geared towards low and moderate income households. So low income households are households that earn 50% or less of median income. Moderate households are that 80% AMI category. And as of April 1st, the area median income for the Charlottesville metro region has increased to $125,800 a year. That's up from about $122,000 as of last year. And so if you see from this graph, 80% of AMI is about $70,000 a year, and that would be for a household of four. And to meet the low income category of 50% AMI or less, for a family of four, that's about $44,000 a year.
So I'm
Um,
sorry, low income is not defined as 60% or below, it's defined as 50%?
It's correct.
Ah, okay.
Um, it's HUD really sets those income level definitions. So low income is considered 80% AMI, and pretty much down to 50%. 50% down to 30% is low income, and below 30% is extremely low income.
Got it.
And I believe all of you have seen this chart, this graph before. This is our housing affordability spectrum. And it really moves from the extremely low income category, which includes persons experiencing homelessness and need to live in emergency shelters or transitional housing, moving into permanent supportive housing and housing choice voucher programs, which really focus on 50% AMI and below households, affordable rental housing, which is that 60% AMI category. So that includes your low-income housing tax credit projects, up to affordable home ownership, which for the county, we set that at 80% of area median income, and then up to 120% AMI. So from that 81% AMI up to 120% is generally defined as workforce housing. And so again, the housing policy, Housing Albemarle, really focuses on that 80% AMI and below households. We can really look at who qualifies for affordable housing based on income limits. These are typically set by HUD of each year. They set them at the 80, 50, and 30% of area median income categories. So based on the current area median income of $125,800, a family of four at 80% of AMI would need to earn no more than $100,650 a year. So with that increase in our area median income, that's expanded the households that qualify for affordable housing.
And you guys also picked up, all these slides are in your packet, right? Okay, good.
Yep.
And this is just some information from.
Can I ask, sorry?
Absolutely.
Can I just ask a quick question on that? So it seems once we got to that, if you can go back to the previous slide.
Yep.
So this is really talking about the household income, right?
Correct.
But the 33 is an individual, the $33.25, obviously, that's an individual. That
That is,
But
but
it
that
could
would
be
also qualify for a household.
But it could also be a blended wage in the household.
Correct.
So it's just yeah, so it doesn't, while we look at it that, it could be
Yeah,
a
it
blended.
could. You could
yeah,
have two people earning minimum wage.
Right,
And they'll probably
that
get
might get you up to 30, but here
30.
that really doesn't get you up to 30, it probably gets you just below 30 if
Right.
they're doing minimum wage here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it just says this one's the first one, because obviously you got one person earning 70, but then as you add, you're potentially adding income, so it's really the household.
Yeah, correct. HUD makes those, they adjust, they always start at the 4-person household, and that is the straight percentage. So that 80% AMI is strictly 80% of that 125,800, plus a little weird manipulation by HUD. They round up, everything is like ends in a 50 or a 00. And then they adjust downwards for smaller household sizes. So they would take that 4-person household amount and multiply that by 0.7 for a single person. And they do that to sort of even out the buying power of households.
Thank you.
And this is just some information from HUD about the number of households that fit within that each of those categories. This data is from 2021. Their data in this type of data tends to run about 3 to 4 years behind always. So we don't know exactly what those categories are, but this comes from HUD. And so there is definitely a majority of the households in the county that are below 100% AMI, and many of those are at the 80% AMI and below categories.
Am I correct in observing that also if we look at, until you get to greater than 100%, so greater than 125.8, that the majority of the housing stock, or the majority of the people in houses or in apartments here are renters, it's in rental property.
I don't have that breakdown of the data. I can certainly find that for you and share it after the meeting if you're.
I was just sort of extrapolating from I guess I'm gonna call it copper, the copper color, that's as opposed to the.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was just extrapolating. So. And what it would be interesting to see, I mean, I know what the population in Jack Jewett is. The majority of the people in Jack Jewett district are in rental property, but it'd be interesting to see how that sort of distributes out across the rest of the districts.
I'm not entirely certain we can get that through census data, but I can try.
Okay, I just think that would be helpful as we sort of think through.
You mean to be thinking geographically about where the
Correct.
biggest needs are within the community.
Correct. You know, because we talk a lot about sort of what is the quality of life issues that we've talked about during the comp plan. And while I would sort of make a bold and brass statement, thinking that those individuals who are in denser communities would probably like to have green space, would like to be able to get the things a lot easier than those people who may be living in single family or single family occupancy spaces, just because of the various things that come with being able to live in a single family housing house, as opposed to those who are living in a more dense multifamily community.
The Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership is about to begin updating the housing policy. Their consultant has access to more data sources than county staff do, because they have the budget to pay for them that we do not. So it may be that I'll have to see exactly what type of data they're looking for, but we can certainly try to get something to you before then.
And Ms. Pat, I don't think it's a stretch to say that if we were, so more than half or below, this is 2021 data.
Right.
So the AMI has increased since then,
Correct.
quite a bit actually in these last 4 years. So I'm assuming this number is probably quite a bit higher than.
That's my guess, but I cannot verify that yet. HUD works with the Census Bureau to do some special tabulations of data, and they break it down in ways that I can't necessarily get through the data that we have access through public means with the Census Bureau. So I will see what we can find. Thinking about cost burden households. So these are households that are paying 30% or more of their income for housing. This is back again, the 2021 data, because that was the most recent available. At that time, 2 out of every 10 low and moderate income homeowners were housing cost burdened. So those were homeowners with incomes at or below 80% of AMI. And nearly every 2 out of every 4 renters with the lowest household incomes are severely cost burdened, which means they were paying more than half of their income towards their housing costs. So that would be renters that had incomes in the below 50% AMI category.
And I think I saw a note when you set that number out, it's not just rent, but it's some additional piece that goes in there.
Correct. It's your
Utility.
rent and utilities.
Utility.
So it's the gross rent, not the net rent on the unit. Projecting out to 2040, and this information comes from the housing needs assessment that was completed in 2019. By 2040, that study estimated that 1 out of every 4 households will experience housing cost burdens in 2040. And so that was all the way up to 100% of AMI, not just the 80% AMI and below. And 3 out of every 4 households with incomes below 50% of area median income will experience housing cost burdens by 2040. So again, those are the households that will pay more than 30% of their income towards their renter costs. So what has Albemarle County been doing about all of those numbers? Well, if you remember, the Board of Supervisors adopted Housing Albemarle in July of 2021. The housing policy includes 12 objectives and 93 strategies or action steps. To date, staff has achieved or implemented 20 of those 93 strategies, so that's 22%. Staff is currently working on 43 of those strategies and action steps, so another 46% are in action. 30 have not yet started, and that is basically because either some of the steps that we are currently working on need to be completed first in order to move to those, or there just simply isn't any funding available to do them at this time.
Can I ask a couple questions about that. One is, in terms of your original aspirations, your goals, did you feel like you'd be about where we are now, or did you have higher aspirational goals, or do you feel like you're ahead of things?
I thought we might be slightly more ahead than we are. If you remember, the housing policy was not fully implemented until March of last year. And that was when the board approved the developer incentive program. So working forward from that is we're hoping to work off of that to move forward. But also looking ahead towards updates in the housing needs assessment that may change everything we need to do. So it's one of the recommendations that was not included in Housing Albemarle, but is a really good idea, is to review what's going on every 5 years or so and then make changes moving forward. So we, staff is always looking at what's happening, what can be improved, what can change. And so we will be working on that. I believe there are some plans to have initial data from the housing needs assessment available within the next 12 months. It doesn't make sense to really work on an updating of the housing policy in earnest until we know what those numbers are. That will help us moving forward. So we're always looking to see where things can change. We have a list of stuff that we think is ready to be changed to move forward, could work better in other ways. So we're going to work on that.
So of those 93 strategies and action steps, which feels like a lot of strategies and action steps, how are you prioritizing them?
A lot of it was, we're really looking at what needs to be put in place in order for everything else to work.
I see.
That's what was prioritized. So really the developer incentive program was one of the top priorities. Finding ways to make the affordable housing fund more sustainable over the long term was another priority. So staff is working with that now. So it's really getting those bases, that base level going, and then seeing what has worked, where we can tweak things.
Yeah.
But really starting the conversation in more earnest among planning commissioners, board of supervisors, developers in the community about how we can move together forward in a better way. That conversation hadn't necessarily happened in any meaningful way in the past. It happened here and there, but not in any coordinated manner.
Hmm.
So I think we've been able to begin to set that stage in a really good level that we can move forward.
So I have a question about one of these items, housing preservation. You know, one of the things that I find very interesting about my neighborhood is within a very short walk of my house, we have properties that are with the house and property that are assessed at under 140,000. And then, you know, a very short walk from that, you have properties with the house that are assessed at over 1.5 million. And so I'm very fascinated by particularly the rural area properties that are currently affordable. And I'm familiar with some of the programs that we have to preserve those, but what are we really doing to take stock of the houses that people are currently living in that are affordable to those folks, and really working on housing preservation to make sure that we don't displace those people, or when those properties change hands, that we can keep those properties, that housing stock affordable as it is now.
To date, we've been working very closely with AHIP, the Albemarle Housing Improvement Program, to make sure that they are able to obviously there's not enough funding to cover every household that needs help, but working with them to get out into the community and help make the repairs that are necessary to help people stay in their homes over a longer term. Once that funding is provided, there is a lien placed on the home that does require that home remain affordable for a particular period of time, as long as that current homeowner is in there. And then we recoup the money either in the sale of the property, or should a homeowner pass away and give that home to surviving family members. If one of their family members is income qualified, then we just allow them to remain in the home. So again, the home remains affordable for the longer term through that period. In terms of rental housing, again, we work with local nonprofits. Should a building become available, let's say mall side apartments, for example, one of the larger affordable communities, it's been on and off the market several times over the last couple of years. Where we can assist nonprofits to possibly move in and buy that, we are open to doing so. It's oftentimes a lot of money that we don't necessarily have on hand, but working together to try to pull community members together, other organizations that may be able to get the funding to at least put a down payment on and a bid on the property. So we're looking at ways to do that.
And how many people have we currently served by AHIP, in the past year?
That's a great question. I am not sure. We used to use community development block grant funding for them and those projects, particularly in the rural areas. We have not done that in the last couple of years. They have been getting funding through the Planning District Commission and their Home Investment Partnership. So they have those numbers. I do not, but we can certainly get those for you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that because what struck me about that, and I do think that's a critical piece, is how we look to preserve the affordable housing stock that we have, right? And we've had that conversation before. It's how much are we losing? Do we know? And I know it's hard to track, but what struck me is when I looked at 1.14 in your objectives, which is that one that talks about housing preservation, but that was listed as something that has not started. It said, maybe it's just the way it's worded, but it says not yet considered / not started.
Which is on around page 30 in the packet for those.
It's on the spreadsheet.
Yeah, so that's the one thing. I mean, I think the presentation is great. And it's a lot of great information. And one of the things that really jumped out at me was that one.
Yes.
Because I would think that is one that we would have really prioritized high.
It is, but that requires a significant amount of money.
Yeah, but there's other partnerships, right? So DHCD has a program for preservation, and I mean, there's other Virginia and federal.
There are.
That,
Federal money is a bit hard to
yeah,
get.
right now, but certainly there's Virginia.
There are. Those are all competitive grants. And so that, along with the Community Development Block Grant Program, some of those are not available to local government to apply for. They must be applied for by the nonprofits themselves. And so AHIP does apply for those funding streams when they can. Okay. And so there are other ways that we can look at doing that, but it does require some significant amount of funding and a consistent source of funding. So once we get that funding side worked out, particularly through the housing fund, it will make it easier going forward. That's the only reason. It is a funding issue that we haven't prioritized it.
If we just sort of expand that, and I guess at some point there'll be a bit of a question to my colleagues here. So in that 1.4, you're talking about establishing zones. You were talking about sort of preservation zones. And I would imagine a number of those preservation zones, if we certainly look to a survey of the housing stock that we have, the present housing stock, is not in what we would consider the development area. That's not where a lot of that housing is. And yet we were a bit sort of, uncomfortable sort of replicating that type of housing down in the Esmond area recently. So I'd like to, at some point, I won't be here when that probably happens.
There are.
I know, I didn't say that. I said I said we as a body, So at some point, we're gonna have to wrestle with what that means, because I would offer as a suggestion, most of the affordable single-family housing is not in the development area. And
Yeah, and as with community meetings about the comp plan, people talked about, we would like to have some condos, we would like to have some more dense housing so we can stay in our community, especially as we age in place. And I completely agree with
I
that.
agree with that. And so I think there's some tension there.
Well, but does it have to be attention? I mean, why does housing preservation have to be linked to development zones or non-development zones?
Well, because it's not that. That's not where I'm going. The housing preservation is about preserving a unit that is at risk of turning over.
Right.
So that's a person, that's not adding to the unit. That's just basically keeping the family people, the individuals who are there in that particular unit. That's fine, but if we sort of are looking for community goods to enhance the sort of affordable housing in our community, that's how I think that type of housing, whether it be more modest or be on a piece, whatever the tract of land is, you're going to see those kind of opportunities more in the rural part of the community than you are going to be in the development area. And so it's like, if it's okay to preserve one house, then why is it not okay to add to that inventory in smart and cautious ways, but to do it in a way that sort of is building that out in a way that we're not just looking at preserving ones and twos that have by the course of nature are falling on hard times.
Yeah, I agree. It's a topic that needs to be discussed more. However, that one of the paradoxes there is that if you added, one of the reasons that the rural area is affordable is because it's lacking in uses. Like there's a whole bunch of uses you're not allowed to have, and you're not allowed to have public water and sewer and all these other things. If you go back and add those things, you say, okay, well, now you can do duplexes, you can do an apartment, or you can do whatever. Well, you've now added those values to the property, and the assessment is going to go through the roof for those properties, which I would say, I mean, could result in displacement.
Yeah.
So that there's that paradox there, of that if you, in an attempt to try and create more affordable housing, you could very easily end up displacing the people that are there.
Yeah, I'd like to put a caution. So what I was suggesting was not bringing public services there. There are plenty of ways that one can create a community without having to bring public water or public sewer to them. I mean, I could list numbers of places that have multiple units that are nice units to live that do not have public water or public sewer. So I would hope that whoever does this is that's not the litmus test that they use on whether or not there should be additional housing in the non-development part of our community, which I think is how, given most of you either look at or get either the Daily Progress or the other paper that comes out. If you look at that weekly number of what our housing stock cost here, it's sort of a little Venn diagram with different colors and something like that. There will never be an opportunity that number starts going down in a significant way. When we're sitting at $500,000 for a regular house, maybe it's a severe depression that's going to get it close to $100,000 again. But if that happens, none of us we'll all be doing Victory Gardens someplace, or Poverty Gardens. I should probably rename that, and not being able to do anything. So I'm trying to think about what are the realities where you're going to have the opportunity to sort of look at that kind of work. And if we get beyond the ones and twos and think about sort of smart communities, they're not going to be in the development area.
Well, I think the other big problem with that too, and we've discussed this before, is the method by which we do subdivisions in the rural area, which lends itself to 21-acre lots. And there's no way you can make a 21-acre lot affordable. And so I think reconsidering the way that we think about how we do subdivision, I would much rather see a bunch of, because I'd look at the affordable lots in my neighborhood, a lot of them are 2-acre lots, not 21-acre lots. And so, someone we have I see a bunch of people, they'll take a 2-acre lot and they'll put a trailer on that 2-acre lot. And now that is an affordable place for them. To the degree that we're limiting the ability to do that and encouraging these oversized subdivisions, I think that's creating inaffordability.
So I just want to clarify, now that I found the page that you are talking about, housing rehabilitation zones are a specific designation allowed by the state code. And that they are generally created not to necessarily preserve housing, but to encourage housing preservation and development. And it allows localities to provide a variety of incentives that we could not normally provide. So that's what.
But we haven't started to
Correct.
tackle that yet.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's like an overlay.
Sort of, yes. Yeah.
We would designate that would then make those areas, we could put projects there because we designate.
Well, we can apply for grants and.
Yeah.
Things like, I have to remember, it's been a while since I've read that part of the code. You could provide different incentives to developers, such as forgiving overdue taxes on properties so that you could bring an abandoned property back into production. There's a whole list of things you can do. Those benefits would last for 10 years. And so it is sort of like an overlay,
Mhm.
correct?
Can I have just a quick kind of sort of process related question? I maybe alluded to this at the beginning, because this is all great. It's a lot of what we are doing. I'm also, I think we're talking a little bit about how are we doing
Yeah.
it too, right? So I just want to get in my mind clearly the sort of roadmap
Mhm.
of sort of process roadmap. So when you think about the housing Albemarle, there's the drafting and adopting phase, which is done, right? And you said, I think that gets another look every 5 years.
Correct.
Then there's the implementing phase, which we're kind of in now.
Yep.
Then there's the assessing phase, and that's the housing needs assessment. How often does that happen? Is that annual?
No, the last time it was done 2019.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
so I do believe Planning District Commission staff are going to work with so they're working with Virginia Commonwealth University
Got it.
and their Center for Housing Studies. They're going to go through training with them so that they can understand what data is used, how to look at the data, and so that they can do those updates on a more regular basis. So maybe not have to wait 5 years, but be able to do it every other year or annually. We are sending 2 housing staff to those trainings as well,
Great.
so that they will be able to, I can do a lot of it myself. I just don't have access to the data.
Yeah.
But I don't have, that's not necessarily time for me to sit down and do that every 2 years. So if
Okay.
we have more housing staff that are trained in how to do those, we can take things steps at a time. So, and do it more often.
Okay,
the
that's
plan.
good to know.
Yes.
And then there's the discussing and workshopping, right? Which is kind of it's sort of, I guess, an ongoing thing.
Mhm.
And then there's adjusting and refining.
Correct.
So the workshopping piece, when you think about the development community, and I was a part of some of the work sessions that you had with the development community, I think you mentioned this a little while ago, how are you engaging in the development community to understand the influence of things like executive orders or canceled federal funds or things like that, so that you can adapt to those things?
Sure. Definitely with the nonprofits, the nonprofits and county and city governments have been getting together. I think every Monday
Oh, okay.
around lunchtime to talk about the changes in the federal funding, how it's impacting our local nonprofits. And then also, I believe the Community Foundation is involved in those, so they are understanding what the funding needs are going to be. If everything that is proposed in the current budget actually happens, no local government can make that up.
Right.
It's just too big.
Yeah.
So it's really trying to understand how local developers and nonprofits are being impacted by those cuts, what that could potentially mean, and then figuring out ways that we could potentially help with other partners.
Thank you.
So have we done an analysis of return on investment for, dollars spent? What is our best return on investment for a given program? In terms of how much affordable housing that generated?
I don't have it in this presentation, but I can certainly provide that to all of you. We really get, the best investments we can make are in affordable rental housing. That is where the county's investment has the most impact. It generally, I believe, the county investment comes out to be probably 10-11% of the total project cost with rental housing, due to the low-income housing tax credits that come in and all the other funding that's brought in. So it's really, up to $30 for every dollar that the county puts into those projects and leverage. So that's really the best option for the county. More units than you would get with home ownership. It's not to say home ownership doesn't matter. There's a lot of great work going on at Southwood. And so it's just funding wise, if we're looking at the county's biggest bang for its buck, it's really in rental housing.
Thank you.
Housing Albemarle really took a multifaceted approach to affordable housing, really looking at rental assistance programs, housing for special needs populations, a density bonus program, affordable rental housing incentive program. financing, providing financial support for new construction and preservation, and an affordable dwelling unit program listserv, or waiting list, interest list, whatever we want to call it. That has started. Internally, we are beginning to bring people from the community in. That's a bit difficult to convince people to sign up for, since proffer units come online randomly. So you could sit there 5 years before one becomes available. So we're working on building that and finding good ways to make those units more available more often, right? And it's really coming up with a great system with developers or the property managers. Some of the new developments that have come online, property managers have worked in Northern Virginia and Fairfax County, Loudoun counties, which they're used to working with those types of programs. So I think we're going to build that system much better than we had been before.
Can you stay there for just for a second? Because that was a lovely sort of menu of items, and I wanted to have some sense of, out of those items, where do you think you're getting the most leverage?
Out of all of those, I would say definitely new construction. Because we just need units, and so and again, the rental units are just a better investment leverage wise. There has been an increase in developers working with the Piedmont Community Land Trust. And so the proffer units, instead of selling them most developers really don't know how to look for income qualified households to purchase those proffer units. That's been part of the problem. So what several of them have started doing is working with the Community Land Trust. They will sell the units to the land trust, who have people that they work with all the time that are income qualified. They do all the legwork to help them find the necessary down payment assistance. And then again, those units stay affordable forever. So those resale prices are restricted in perpetuity. So that, I think, that has been one of the wins that has come out of Housing Albemarle, and that connection that has been made. Housing navigation services, the county did fund a housing navigator with Piedmont Housing Alliance and their Financial Opportunity Center. That has been really successful, being able to connect lower income renters, not just with affordable units. They really sit down and do the search. They help them search for units. They help people that are not ideal renters navigate that conversation with landlords to help them secure units, and where necessary, it will help people address credit issues and different barriers that they have experienced so far to renting. So that's been a great relationship as well.
How is the Community Land Trust doing?
I-
in general, the
Good.
Piedmont?
They're quiet, so you don't hear a lot about
Yeah.
them. But I believe they just did a presentation for the Charlottesville Association of Realtors, and I want to say they now have 40 units in their portfolio. They are expanding, I believe, into Fluvanna County. I think they're working with the Fluvanna Louisa Housing Foundation to build some units there. So they're expand slowly, but they're getting a bigger reach, definitely.
And if I understand, so a developer, and what they used to do is they would proffer some amount of land or some amount of units. Now they're being able to proffer dollars to that land trust, and that's sort of the.
No, they will build the unit and then sell
they'll
the
build
unit.
So they're not being able to proffer the dollar side. I'm gonna do my units
Correct.
at market rate, but I'm gonna take the functional equivalent and put it in the land trust.
Yeah, no, so I think Victorian Heights is
Oh,
a good
yes, up on
example. Up on
Berkmar.
Berkmar, I believe they have 8 units that through the bonus density program. Those 8 units are being sold. So Greenwood Homes is going to build those. They're going to sell those units to the Piedmont the Community Land Trust, who already has buyers lined up for those 8 units. So, and they've worked with, I believe it was in Spring Hill, They did the same thing for 15 proffered units in Spring Hill. So those proffered units were built and they were purchased by income qualified buyers through the Community Land Trust. So they will remain affordable forever.
So that effectively sort of goes to the conversation that a number of us have had about the list, particularly Corey's always asked, how do we know if we're getting
Yeah.
people on the list? So this is the alternative. This seems actually a much more reasonable way to have, to get people into housing without your office having to worry about whether or not we're matching the people up there, because you said, no, go here. And then they do all the stuff that's necessary to get a family or get an individual into a purchase place. So this is only for purchasing. So for rental,
Correct.
they would go through the housing navigation group or no.
So particularly property managers that have moved from Northern Virginia down here, they understand how to advertise the units. So they have been advertising on the websites that they have some income restricted units available. And then they don't list the price of the rent, but you have to call and we have worked with them to make sure that they understand what the qualifications are income wise.
A quick follow on. So I mean, obviously we like the model of the land trust because they stay affordable in perpetuity. But theoretically, like, let's say land trust doesn't have unlimited dollars to help buy all these. I mean, something similar could happen with, say, another housing provider like Piedmont Housing Alliance or something could do it, right?
Correct.
So are you seeing that?
Before the land trust came on board, a lot of developers were working with Habitat.
Right.
And so they would proffer 15 units and then Habitat would build those 15 units and sell them. And that's it so far. But Piedmont, the Community Land Trust is really a subsidiary of Piedmont Housing
Okay.
Alliance. So they work
Okay.
together.
I didn't understand that. All
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
thanks.
that's fairly recent
Okay.
change. That has helped in order to get, since Piedmont Housing Alliance does the home ownership programs and education, it's helped to get that waiting list of buyers sort of in line and ready to go.
Good.
I thought we should talk a little bit about the Housing Choice Voucher Program. It's not something anybody talks a lot about in the county. Our program is relatively small, and I apologize for the weird formatting on that slide. It looked fine on my computer in the office. So currently we have 345 households receiving Housing Choice Voucher assistance. 30 of those are project-based vouchers. And so the Housing Choice Voucher Program, if you're not aware, under that program, the county, the Office of Housing provides a voucher to a family, an individual or family. They take that voucher out into the rental market to secure a place to live. Then they pay 30% of their income towards the rent. The county then pays the remainder, that 70%, up to that voucher payment standard, which we talked about way at the beginning. With project-based vouchers, those voucher assistance is attached to a specific unit. And then the county maintains waiting lists for those units. And so when we get down to a certain level, we just opened a waiting list for Hickory Hope Apartments out in Southwood. And so when those are ready to be occupied, we will begin pulling people off of those waiting lists, making sure that they actually qualify for assistance to the program and placing them in there. So that when that family leaves that unit remains affordable. In this case, for 15 years, that's the general time period for those project-based contracts. We can extend those into the future if we want, and we generally do. So we have 30 of those out there now. Coming up in the future, we will have 47 project-based vouchers at the Premier Circle, now Vista 29 apartments. That is specifically in the permanent supportive housing project. So that will ensure that of the 80 units, more than half of those receive rental assistance through the county. Piedmont Housing Alliance also has a project in the city that we're partnering with the city and PHA on. We will have 5 vouchers going in there and then 8 at Hickory Hope Apartments.
I'm sorry, Dr. Pethy, real quick. If you have this number on the top of your head, What is the gap between how many people are, say, on a waiting list for housing vouchers versus how many that we offer? And I don't know how that breaks down between city and county, but
We just opened the waiting list.
okay.
I think we had maybe 12 to 1,500 applicants. And then we do a random lottery drawing for 800 applications. We can get through 800 applications in 2 years. And that's understanding that not all of those 800 people actually will fully qualify for the program. But based on the information they provided on their the income they provided on their application, makes them qualified to potentially receive assistance. Once they make it to the top of the waiting list, then we do a fuller certification of them, and that covers income. We will look at, I believe, we do have to check some criminal backgrounds. There are some crimes that HUD does not allow people to receive assistance for. And so if they qualify based on all those, then they get the voucher assistance.
So of the 1,500 to 1,700 that you start out with, are you saying you're randomly pulling 800 to actually go through? So we don't know if all 1,500 or 1,700 would really actually would be qualified.
That is correct. We don't know if all 800 we have on our waiting list will fully qualify in the end.
Either.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but theoretically yeah, okay. So the takeaway is that this demand is still way, way, way higher
Correct.
than the amount that our county and even city are allocating to the problem.
Correct.
I'm curious, what is how do people learn about these programs? Do you all proactively advertise them? How do you promote them? And
We do advertise anytime the voucher program waiting list opens.
yeah,
We work with local media, so the announcements are made on Channel 29 and CBS 19, through the newspapers, radio, the county sends out information. But through personal experience, having worked for housing authorities, this program in the past, and with housing authorities in other areas, it really takes one person to hear about it, and it spreads like wildfire.
word of mouth.
So
Yeah.
it's huge. We don't really need to do that much advertising, but there are websites that will scour announcements, so media to find, and there's, I think, section8.com scours the internet every day to see where waiting lists across the country are open.
Interesting.
And that's because anyone from anywhere in the country can apply for a voucher wherever they want to go, as long as they would just have to move there. So, I don't think we've had anyone outside of Virginia apply to our program, but we've definitely had people from Northern Virginia apply for vouchers here.
Thank you.
Before you move on, so just to clarify, when you talk about the amount of money or the amount that a unit can be leased for, we go back to the average apartment rents, that's sort of the upper level.
So if you look at the table above that, the fair market rent,
Uh-huh,
that's $17.29 a month
uh-huh.
for the 2 bedrooms. So that is what HUD says they will pay. We are able to go up to 110% of that.
110% of that, okay.
Correct.
Okay, and do we have any sense of, this is the harder piece. This is my complaint. I don't know what your pro forma looks like. So I don't know whether or not you're making money or not. When people say, I don't, so do we have any sense of whether or not when we go to 110 for instance, for the 1729, if that's closing a gap or if it's owned by a management company? So if it's a company that's bringing in and they're going to keep the rental units, are they allowed to sort of at least be cost neutral on something like that? Or are they still having to make a contribution to, or eat a portion of that to be in this business? I'm going to ask that question when we come down to the 30-year proffers too, because that's like, well, that's a lot of time to be asking somebody to eat some cash.
So what happens a lot is we negotiate with landlords and property managers. So we are limited to that 120% of FMR. We cannot pay above that. Voucher holders can, if they have certain, if their income allows, they can pay up to 40% of their own income towards rent. We try not to let that happen.
Okay,
But we can't deny, we can't stop them from doing that if that's what they want. But we do a lot of negotiating. Some landlords just won't bring it down. It's also, we also base the payment standard on comparables. So we make sure that we do rent comparables for every application that comes in. So even if somebody wanted to, set the rent at 120% of that 1729, and the comparables come back and show that actually comparable units are renting for 1,500 a month, we would say, got to lower it to 1,500 or we can't do it. So, and there are landlords that understandably would say, I can't go that low. So there's a lot of negotiating that goes on in that program. Just wanted to provide a little bit of information about some of the people in our program. About 20% of the households in our program include a member that has a disability of some sort. 30% of the program participants are senior citizens, so they're 62 years or older. And the average household income of our program families is about $19,600 a year. So they're all pretty low income that comes in. 75% of the program participants for all new vouchers. So if we were to issue 10 vouchers today, 75% of those households would have to have incomes at 30% AMI or below. Households can earn up to 80% of AMI before they leave the program. So as their income increases, they pay more and more of their rent. The county pays less and less of their rent. So ideally, in order to serve more people, we would have everybody at 70% of AMI. But really, the program is really focused on the most vulnerable households.
So those numbers, the 28 and the 30%, the age and disability related numbers, are those target numbers or are those just numbers that you've just observed?
There's a numbers that's just what's in our program.
Okay.
We do have priorities, so we can set priority households
Okay.
that would sort of move them up the waiting list. And those are, I might get all of these wrong, but one is persons experiencing homelessness. We do take those referrals directly from the homeless services community, so that you can't just say you're experiencing homelessness and get an extra point. You have to actually have a certification from BRAC or some other organization. We do prioritize families with children, I believe under 5, and also senior citizens. And so that means that as we go through the waiting list, we pull those families off first.
Got it. Thank you.
We also have 100, we have several, what we call special purpose vouchers. And we have a couple different kinds. Ones are mainstream vouchers. We have 105 of those. Those assist non-elderly persons with disabilities. So that can be a household that included any member that had a disability as long as they are not a senior citizen. We also have family unification vouchers, and we work directly with the Department of Social Services for these. And they are families that they have a child or children in the care system, and they are struggling to have that child returned to their care due to a lack of housing. Or the child is at risk of being removed from the home due to a lack of housing. And so we can use those vouchers to help them secure housing and keep their child to get the child back. We also have housing for special populations, and these are targeted to specific groups. Generally in our area, they are seniors and persons with disabilities. So if you think about Scottsville School, Crozet Meadows, Woods Edge Apartments, and permanent supportive housing programs, we work with all of those to make sure that families in our area, individuals and families, have affordable places to live. Moving on to how much money the county has invested in affordable housing over the last 4 to 5 years. It's really been almost $20 million. And that has come from a variety of sources. This is specifically the Affordable Housing Investment Fund. And that covers Southwood, Hickory Hope Apartments, Vista 29, a number of other projects that are there.
Sorry.
Yep.
Can you back up to that for a sec? So, getting back to the how are we doing? This line's kind of all over the place. It's not steadily increasing or steadily decreasing. It's kind of bouncing around, and it seems like that's oftentimes because there are funds that show up in a sense that are all of a sudden available for affordable housing, right?
Yes, so the big numbers at the top, that was really coming out of the American Rescue Plan Act funding.
Yeah, and then this year's is a kind of hodgepodge of funding, right? That's been
Correct.
pulled together, and if I'm not mistaken, there's a portion that is to be retained over time, which is a small portion of that 3.7 or 3.8 million.
Correct.
It's like 1.2 or 1.4.
It's about that, yes.
The remainder is kind of like reserve, not reserves, but there's other funding that was found that's sort of temporary funding.
Correct. And I think there's a few slides at the end that go over that, so we can get to that in more detail.
Okay, remind me then. I'll
Yeah,
wait.
so that would be the sort of how the a potential housing trust fund would be structured.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess part of, well, just to have in our minds, part of it is what is our aspirational goal?
Right.
And how do we get there?
Correct.
Easy questions.
I mean, there is a reasonable solution if Richmond would ever allow counties to be able to go and put before their population the ability to add a tax on that would go to schools. Then that would at least allow some portion of the 60% of the county's budget to be allocated someplace else. But when the county's got to push 60% of its budget or more
Yeah.
to support the school, so I mean, there are solutions to this. And some of them sit at the other end of 64. And so, you know, if you want to have some flexibility, then we've got to get a mindset down there in the capital to change and allow counties to make those kinds of decisions, or at least allow counties to put it before their legislature. I mean, before their populace. So, you know, there are options, but some people always want you to fight with one arm behind your back.
So this is really looking at the number of households that have been served since 2022. In 2022, we really were serving about 881 people, and that is through the funding that was shown on the previous slide. And that has increased steadily over the years. As of this fiscal year, it was about 1,200 households that have been or will be served through this program, including through rental housing assistance, owner-occupied housing, whether that's through down payment assistance or subsidies to help construct new housing, homeless services, shelters for domestic violence survivors and homeless persons, and housing counseling services. These are sort of the three big projects that have really been focused up for the county Office of Housing over the last couple of years. Southwood, obviously, in phase one, the funding through the housing fund and the property tax rebates through the performance agreement has subsidized 211 units to be built in phase one of Southwood. That does not include the 121 units at Hickory Hope Apartments. That's an additional 121 units in phase one of Southwood. And Vista 29 will be a total of 140 units. So currently the first 80 are under construction as we speak. Demolition at the site has just completed. I drove past there. I live around that area, so drove past there. There are no buildings from the red carpet in standing. It was very exciting to see. And once that phase is completed, then Piedmont Housing Alliance will build an additional 60 units that will be reserved for seniors and families. Looking at the number of units in the county, this is what is existing as of the beginning of this year. So this includes subsidized units such as the ones owned and managed by Piedmont Housing Alliance, bonus density units, proffer units that have been rented or sold to income qualified households, and units that have been preserved through AHIP. That's about 2,200 units. That were in the housing stock and affordable right now. Those are what we know of. That does not include the that did not include things like Cavalier Crossing. They were not officially affordable housing, so they were not counted at that time. And there are obviously smaller units throughout the area that rent at affordable prices that we just don't know about. They tend to be owned by, small landlords. They're hard to track. We got to figure out a way to do that. We're just not sure the best way to do that yet. And the units that we have in the pipeline, there's a little over 3,000 that are in the pipeline. Subsidized rental units, so that does include things like Hickory Hope Apartments and Vista 29. And then a little over 2,100 proffer units that have yet to be constructed. We don't know if those will be homeowner or rental units until much further down the line, but that's what is proffered and approved. And we are waiting to see constructed.
Can I get, just to clarify on that, when you say in the pipeline, and you just said proffered and approved?
Correct. So those are the units that were proffered through rezoning approvals that have been approved.
That are in place, because that's a lot of units.
Correct.
Do you have any idea how what the reality of is realizing any of those units, or
I do not.
the timeline with which those would be realized? Yeah, okay.
We track those at least quarterly and to see what's under construction and what's not. We're also working with CDD to get better at doing all of that. We have various spreadsheets from various different groups that track these and trying to pull them all together. So we've been working to try to find a good, consistent way to track those.
I'd be really interested to see that. Like, how long approvals have been sitting on the books without being realized. I can see some sort of a cool chart somehow that reflects that. And then there's that diving down to the next level of why aren't they being realized? Is it, costs of construction, or they haven't gotten their LIHTC funding, or whatever that is? Yeah.
Well, I will say, if they happen to be 100% affordable projects, then the Office of Housing has a really good handle on those because we communicate with them all the time. So we would know, like Vista 29 had been delayed for about a year. They were pretty good at keeping us regularly updated. So about 4 times a year, if anything changed, they would just check in and say, hey, we think we have this funding coming up. And then it was, nope, sorry, we don't. And so we had a pretty good idea of when those were going to start. It's really the units that are proffered and approved.
Yeah.
That's harder for us to track because we don't know when they're going to start.
I mean, is that based on a 15% of the total units being proffered for affordable housing?
Correct. Yes, these are all of the proffer units that have been approved prior to March 1st of last year.
So that's a lot of total units, I assume. That's, if you take, if there's only, this represents 15% of the total units that are
Correct.
available. That's a lot of affordable, or it's a lot of units of residential that are sitting out there.
It is, but not all, what is approved through rezoning, those maximum units are not always what gets built. So it may be
58%, right, of those get built or something? Yeah.
No, I think more of the, if somebody might come in and say, we're gonna do 400 units on the property, they only end up doing 350.
Yeah, that's my point. Yeah, yeah. Only a small portion of, I think it's 58%, right? I'm not sure.
Well, that's
The total
that-
units
that's
are
what we-
realized.
But that's over some of the larger projects when we've seen that they have not, the property is zoned for, or is capable of holding X number of units. And what we typically have been seeing is X minus 58% is what actually gets built on that particular piece of property.
And I think technically I don't know how that would work, but I think it's technically what the comprehensive plan envisions for those areas.
Correct,
It's 50% of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, part of it's a build out analysis where you're trying to figure
Right.
out.
Yeah.
What's we'll call it carrying capacity of property. Okay, it's, take 15% out of the land, multiply with max density, and that's how many units they could have. That's different, I think, than what you're trying to say here, which is these are projects that went through a rezoning.
correct. So these came in rezoning application. we went through and figured out the maximum number of units approved for each of those rezonings, what that 15% would look like. That's where that number comes from. If 5 years from now, the developer comes back with a site plan and instead of building the maximum 400, they said they got approved to build, they're going to build, 300, then that number will decrease.
But this is not a great way to go say, oh, this is 15% of the total percent of units that are out there waiting to, be built.
I see.
I think that would be a mischaracterization.
Yeah, that's helpful. Good, thank you.
And it's
Got
going to come, sort of come along Fred, and to come along on Fred on that, what's sort of my time on the commission is, as what I've observed is that we've had a number of projects that were being advanced by developers who are not locals. And often those developers didn't want to pull up with the foolishness that they were having to put up with, not here, but just the community pushback. And many of them said, I'm selling this piece of property. So the one at Rio and JW, the Warner Parkway, the original project was actually a very interesting project, but some of the folks across the street just sort of became, annoyed. I'll just say that. And then the project that was on 29 up from, is it Brookville? Is that I think Brookhill, that they've assumed that property? That was also a good part of that property was going to be affordable.
Right.
But the people behind them said, we don't want those type of people living on the other side of the fence from us. So there is this sort of thing that happens around here is that you have people who come in and who do the pro formas and say, yeah, we can make this an affordable community. And then the community goes crazy and says, no, we don't want affordable housing here. That I just, that is not a sustainable model for Albemarle County to always have have those developers subjected to people who want to say no. Or who don't want those people. I don't want those people next to me.
So I think another factor here, and you mentioned the limitations placed on us by Richmond. I really wish we had the ability to put a time limit on rezonings. Because, you have these projects that sit out there for just years and years and years. And ideally, and I think sometimes they're just waiting out the market. They're just waiting there until the market reaches its peak value and then they put things out on the market. And I think if you had a time limit on those rezonings, then.
You're talking about the time it takes to get a property rezoned?
No,
No, I'm saying once it's rezoned, saying like you need to build for an X number of years or the rezoning is invalidated.
Sort of what we saw with the field school.
It expired.
Yeah, typically.
Yeah, expired. And we've done a bit of that, but well, I can understand that. I also understand sort of the just sort of how the complexity of bringing those size projects, any significant project to market. And there are a lot of pieces that a developer, he or she may not necessarily be able to control.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I would caution the county to putting those kind of sunset clauses on special use permits, unless the county is going to give a refund to the individual if it sunsets it. So, you sunset it, well, we're going to give you back your $50,000 and what it costs you to do. And I don't think this county's going to do that.
Well,
but there needs to be some exchange that happens there.
Well, so the problem is that, a lot changes over decades, right? We have totally different ordinances. We have totally different goals as a community. I would argue there's got to be some number, whether maybe it's 50 years, maybe it's 100 years, but it's something. There's got to be a time limit in which a rezoning just does not make sense anymore, that whatever was submitted really doesn't, shouldn't stand.
Yeah, I just don't think, I personally, having gone through this a bunch of times, don't think that should be up to the county. I get your theory. It's important to try to bring and to realize units in the market as quickly as possible. I think the challenge is to developers, there are so many uncontrollable outside influences, including market, including costs of materials and labor. There's so much, and the actual rezoning in some cases is an investment in the land, and that increases the value of the land. And so it's all, if the county were to get into putting in limitations like they do for site plans, right? Site plans, you can vest a site plan, otherwise it expires after 5 years, I think.
Maybe that's the piece.
So that's kind of a different thing, but the zoning piece is the part that gives me a little heartburn, just because of the uncontrollables. I mean, I've lived through a project recently where we were on target to develop affordable housing, and the first round of funding didn't come through, and now there's a whole different thing. It's all thrown up in the air again, and now it's, well, what's the affordability levels? We have to adjust those. What are the materials we're using for the building? Should we shrink the building? Can we do, I mean, it's so hard to get it done.
But I think the piece of learning about whether or not, once you hit a site plan, and if you don't exercise and if you don't actually get a certificate to build or whatever that is, that you have to get the building permit,
Certificate of occupancy.
the building permit, just even
Building
start
permit,
doing
yeah.
dirt.
Oh.
Yeah, just doing dirt.
Site
Then in
plan.
fact, you've got a conversation I think you can have with someone. But then, I mean, we've seen a number of projects that came before us that were very exciting, and then it turned out that the developer sold the project.
Yeah.
And what went there was not very exciting. And, you know, they have to make decisions, but the project got, I know for me, it got a yes vote because I thought what they were gonna do was kind of new and different. And then when whatever decisions they made, maybe that's what they were doing when they came to us, but what came up there was the usual, oh, well, look, it's more of the same. That's what I mean, if I could have anything, I would prefer for it to be like that, so it's probably okay. But you know, what we are dealing with what this panel deals with all the time is how do people maximize the return on an investment? That's what they're doing. And most of the people that come here don't want to have a negative return. You know, they're not in the business of having negative return. So it behooves them to either push the project forward or to say to somebody else, I know you can push it forward. So would you like to buy this? I mean, really, people, and in today's environment, with the vulnerability of that people are expressed with dollars now, they want to push things as fast as possible. They want to lock in money, right? You want to lock in money. In your daytime life. You want to lock things in as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think so. It removes a lot of variables.
And
Yeah.
that costs,
Yeah.
uncertainty costs money.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Well, it's risk.
Yeah, it's risk. And yeah, nobody wants risk.
Did you ever think that one slide would cause that much conversation? That
No,
was good
but
stuff.
it was fascinating.
I think she's used to us.
But she's used to it. Oh.
Thank you.
So again, these are all units that were approved proffers at the 15% AMI, 15% of the total units. So Albemarle did make some changes to profit unit requirements. It increased the percentage from 15 to 20% of the total residential units in a rezoning, and changed the target affordability levels to 60% for area median income for rental units. It did keep it at the 80% AMI level for sale units, and extended the affordability periods of those units from 10 years to 30 years for rental units, and from the first sale only to 40 years for sale units. And that's to really help make sure that we're not constantly chasing after units, which is what we've been doing for years.
Do you have a sense yet? This was the big one for me, because this is a sea change.
Major.
This is a
major,
sea change for
major.
development,
Yeah.
developments. Do you have a sense yet what this is doing to our inventory? Because I will suggest the things that have been coming towards us have not been asking for a lot of new proffers.
They've been grandfathered.
They've been grandfathered. So I'm just wondering what this does to, I mean, I can anticipate what it does, the signal it sends to developers, but I would certainly I'd be very interested in knowing what the reality of these changes are. Because this feels, you're asking me to hold something in my inventory for 3 times as long.
Correct.
And that is a significant change in my calculations.
It is. So there have been several of the rezoning applications and pre-application meetings we've have included, have complied with these requirements. I will say the affordability periods are pretty standard across localities across the country for
Okay.
those time periods.
I don't know that.
Because it complies with, it really goes not complies, but it's comparable to low-income housing tax credit affordability periods for rental housing. Also, localities that have been doing this for a lot longer have sort of hit the same point. At some point, they said we are constantly chasing units every 10 years, and we need to fix that. Also, the affordability levels, there have been some interesting initial conversations with a few developers about potentially alternative ways to meet that 20%. So potentially having a range of affordability levels, which is not a bad idea. It's really, that conversation was one I was hoping was going to happen. I thought it was difficult for staff to determine what that range should be. So the 20% is really based on need in the community. That number came directly from data analysis from the housing study and following census data since then. The target affordability levels is also really what the county needs and is pretty much best practice across the country. But in order to meet that 20%, it really could be, 10% at 60% AMI and so much at here. Trying to figure that out without input from developers and having multiple conversations about that was going to be hard. So I was hoping that this would kickstart those conversations, and it has.
Let's go back for a second. So when you were talking, so I get it. I get the whole 40 to 30-year piece for those projects, which are, let's say, the majority of for affordable housing units. What I'm trying to get a sense of is if I come in as a sort of private developer, and if I want a bit more density, the way I can do that is to say, okay, I'm going to put more here. I'm going to put more affordable units there. But it's the barrier that I would sense, and again, I'll be interested to see how this, it's the barrier that I would anticipate, or the reluctance that I would anticipate to get 6 more units, the density, increase the density to 6 or 7 more units or 8 more units. I'm now saying I've got to preserve those units if they're rental for X amount of time. And that's the piece, to just sort of doing the basic kind of math that I kind of do. That's the piece that feels like it's going to be a drag on the system, because I don't know how you make that calculus work. I just, as a private, not as somebody who's coming into that's what but as a private person, I don't see, I think I think over the course of time, we'll see fewer and fewer people who want to do that because they can't afford
And
it.
that is where the Affordable Rental Housing Incentive Program, the
Okay.
RHIP, I think is what the acronym is. That's where that comes into play. So it's really to help fill that gap.
To fill that gap, yeah, because otherwise you're going to have people make business decisions. No, I'm not going to hold cap. I can't afford to hold capital for that long.
I was skipping ahead to the next slide, so I'll wait. But I had a question on the next. They're kind of tied together, I think.
Well, I'm finished. At some point I'll be interested to hear how this pans out, because I'm putting my skeptical hat on right now that it's going to pan out in a way that's going to increase, that's going to have a significant increase in the number of affordable units from the private sector.
Correct. So it is, I did have the acronym, right? RHIP, Albemarle Rental Housing Incentive Program, which is really to help developers meet the 20% affordable at 60% AMI for 30 years. Virginia code only allows the county to offer this for rental housing production, not home ownership. And there have been some initial conversations with developers about this as well.
So I understand your slide, I guess, and probably this isn't the time to really get too much into the weeds on this, but the first 3 are not incentives, right? They're requirements.
Correct.
So there's only one incentive on here. Do you have a sense from, as we were saying, we've got a lot have come up here and they've been grandfathered, they had their zoning done before this. Have you got a sense that 15% of total taxes due for 30 years is helpful to close the gap? And by that, I mean, does it make a substantial dent in the gap?
I think it really depends on the project.
Yeah.
So there have been a few that, yes, that was fine. There have been other ones where that range of affordability comes into play, right?
I see.
Along with this, if we could do a percentage of this AMI, a percentage of that AMI,
Yeah.
and then it will all work out. So again, that was something that staff didn't feel comfortable doing on our own without having those conversations.
Sure.
And that is probably one of the first things that, looking at the housing policy and making those recommendations for changes
Hmm.
would come from.
Yeah, I mean, because there's a lot of other variables, right,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
play into the cost, capital stack.
Yes, it's also trying to land on a particular range of affordability that could potentially work for everyone. I know the Board of Supervisors has expressed a desire to have everything be very flexible. But then you run into problems where if one developer, the first developer comes in and he does say 10% at 70% AMI and 10% at 60, or let's say 15% at 60 and 10% or 5% at 70, and that gets approved. And then the next person comes in and says, I'm going to do 10 at 80, 5 at 70, and 5 at 60 percent AMI. That's probably a better deal than the first guy got. So unless everything is consistent,
Yeah.
you're good. That will just add another barrier. So it's really finding that sort of happy spot to do that. So that's what staff is working on.
Thank you.
I will say, I think we talked about at one point, like how many rezonings are coming in right now? And it's actually going up.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm trying to check in the new system here. I found at least 9 this year we've had for rezoning so far. That's somebody been come to you since we've changed the policy,
Yeah.
but you're always the last to know, aren't you?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Everyone should know, and I will just say this because everyone knows how I feel about the ag and forestal sort of property things where you give people different kinds of prices to put their thing in hay. And so I'm trying to wrestle with, this is a similar reduction of income to the county based on affordable units. And so there's a piece of me that says, Julian, you should want this. But Julian, always, given that we have very few ways in order to generate income in this county, one of the things that I have to always bring up is this the most efficient way to generate these kind of units? Because the county will take off of a, a 30 or $40 million project, they're going to take a hit off of that on the value on that. And so while I get why it's being done, I have to put this exactly in the same of my sort of annoyance about the ag forestal stuff. That how we give those, they get a different kind of tax reduction without having to give anything to the community. Because as everyone knows, you can have about 100, you can have a 100-acre thing and you get it for the entire 100 acres. You get what is it, the green space thing that you tell, the green open space.
Mhm.
But I can't go on your open space. So since none of these people can go on the open space, why should they get a deduction for that? At least here, I can point to a whole bunch of people who will take advantage, who will be advantaged for this, where I can't do, where it's a single individual for open space use. And that's the thing. I've been saying, I'll give you 100 yards of open space because that's the thing I can see from the road. But why do I want to give you open space for a piece of the valley that I can't see and I'll never be able to see? And that necessarily will never be challenged, never be changed. So there's Julian's rant about taking money out of the county's coffers, and Julian's rant about how come pieces of property that only benefit the owner get tax benefits, where this piece is at least going to benefit a bunch of people who don't have housing. End of my rant.
So I do wonder, we talked before about the housing trust and that applies mainly to really non-rental units, correct? But I wonder how can we nudge the system into more permanent affordable units? And that's what I struggle with. Is there a way, because that seems to be the best solution. I mean, even if we're going for 30 years, then in 30 years, those are then gone, so any ideas about how we can sort of nudge things in a way that would incentivize and encourage units to be more permanently affordable?
Sure.
It's like the land trust model does that partly.
Yeah, it does. It
right?
does. Oh,
Because they keep it forever. If someone leaves, they sell it to the next person.
yes.
It's
So,
affordable.
so the question is, how do we nudge people towards the land trust model? I
Well, that's
don't think
a
we can require.
purchase model, I guess. So you
Yeah.
have to be able to be in a position to own And that there's a lot of hurdles for,
The-
you know, for that versus renting. That's why this is trying to get at it's a lot easier, you know, to get someone in an affordable rental. There's less hurdles than ownership.
The community land trusts, there are some community land trusts in other areas of the country that do rental housing as well. I'm not sure our local community land trust is at that point yet. They may be in the future. A lot of it comes down to, I think you can always extend the affordability period. Yeah, there's that option for anyone, any private developer to say, this is working great, let's just keep them this way. Affordable, potentially offering loans or low-cost loans or grants in the future to help them rehab those units after 30 years, which we would all want that to happen, I think. So it's really looking at that. That's not a priority right now because we got to get other stuff in place. But there are ways to make that happen. And places across the country do it. There are honestly some localities across the country that say all affordable units need to be affordable forever. I don't think we're there in the county yet. I'd have to understand what they do to get developers to comply with that for 99 years for all units.
That's sort of as sort of having a social, as having social housing, but having the owner of social housing be a private entity. And that's a hard place to go. I will just say that, because I don't think the county's ready to own social housing. We don't have the mechanism to have
Correct.
to be that. I mean, we might do that at some point, but we don't, which would get to where you're talking about, is to have social housing, or some of the places earlier. I think the place in Crozet is owned by I think it's owned by the Piedmont people. And so, you know, if you stand up those kinds of nonprofit organizations, they could do it, but that's a hard thing. It's just hard. It's not impossible, but I think it's hard.
I mean, I'm thinking more, to the degree that you have you have nonprofits that are interested in doing that sort of thing, or is there a way that we can leverage public money to assist the nonprofits to sort of bridge the gap, to encourage them to take some of those into permanent affordable houses? So that's what I'm thinking.
Oh, yeah, we do that. And so particularly if they happen to be financed initially by low-income housing tax credits, that affordability period is 30 years. And there's generally expectation for nonprofits that they will reapply for another low-income housing tax credit loan in order to substantially rehab the project, in which case the county would be able to, if there's money available, potentially invest in that like we did with the original construction. Right, another thing that is included in the housing policy is an affordable dwelling unit program. In June 2022, the Board of Supervisors adopted a resolution of intent to potentially amend the zoning code with an ADU ordinance. It is a type of inclusionary zoning. It's used extensively throughout Northern Virginia and many other places across the country. And the ordinance would be a mechanism to enforce the changes in housing Albemarle. That was a priority of the housing policy. It's still a priority. It did get delayed based on a number of factors. One, it took longer to come up with the affordable rental housing incentive program than anticipated. That needed to be in place first. But this is coming back to all of you and the board, hopefully later this year.
And this is not, when I hear ADU, I always think about sort of bed and breakfast places or Airbnb. This is not that.
That is not correct. This is an affordable dwelling unit ordinance. So it's really taking the units that are proffered to us now and finding a different way to get those.
Yeah, I think you were thinking accessory dwelling unit, right? You were talking about accessory dwelling units.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, unfortunately, Virginia code calls it ADU program ordinance, so we got to go with that. Another tool that the Housing Office has put together is the Affordable Housing Evaluation Form. I believe those are often included in your agenda packets. This was really a way for the housing office to kind of track the proffer units that are coming forward in another way, and somehow we're trying to pull this all together.
You find that helpful, that form?
I do. I don't know if all of you do.
I just don't, I mean, maybe I missed it, but I don't remember it being really, it's not always fully filled out, or it just feels very,
I tried to do it so that it could grow, we can grow into it.
I see. Okay.
That way it was already put together and we have room to grow, instead of somehow I needed to throw together a form in 2 minutes that wasn't working.
Got it. Thank you.
Again, we talked about the ADU and the affordable unit interest list. Again, it is up and running. It's just slow to grow because it's difficult to convince people to sign up for something when you can't give them a date that they may have units thrown in their mailbox, but we're working on that. And then the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and this is Housing Albemarle Objective number 6. A housing trust fund differs from the county's current housing fund by having a dedicated source of revenue. I will say the housing fund always had a dedicated source of revenue, and that would be the cash in lieu of affordable unit payments provided by developers. It would always get deposited into the the housing fund. With this next fiscal year budget, there will be that percentage of the tax increase going in. So that will be there year after year. It's a consistent source. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a consistent amount. As you know, property taxes go up and down. And so that amount of revenue that gets placed in there can vary from year to year. Thinking about the proffer payments, we can go 5 years without having anything. We can get $1 million in 1 year, more than $1 million. Another time it may be 50,000. So there was always a consistent source of revenue. It just really varied.
But I'm sorry, this might be out of order of your slides, but I really did want to add, I've been chomping at the bit to ask this. CDBG, Community Development Block Grants, what's the word from HUD about, like all the federal funding is like at risk of all going away, it seems like, except if you want to fly a rocket to Mars. But anyway, what are you hearing? I mean, are we gonna have to just zero that out for 4 years, or what are your thoughts?
Potentially. So in the proposed budget for fiscal year 26, it is completely eliminated, except for disaster relief grants through CDBG. Everything else is just gone. That includes home investment partnership funding as well, will just be gone.
So in the Plan Commission doesn't have any purse strings. What's your sense of the board's, the Board of Supervisors focus on, is the county going to try to shore up funding with our own county coffers, or just take the hit and cut our budget? Or I don't know how far along these conversations have gone.
But they're hard to have because we don't really know at this point. There have been attempts in the past to completely eliminate the CDBG and home programs, and they've always been saved.
I think it's a brave new world.
But that is the purpose behind the nonprofits gathering every Monday to discuss that. We are looking at different ways we can do this. We're also concerned about funding for the Housing Choice Voucher Program and what that might do. So we are really looking at what we would do for that. And I think I would argue, because we have people in housing, that would probably be the first priority for the housing office, is to be able to keep people in their homes that they're in now.
Right.
If we could expand it, great, but I'm not sure we could do that. So we don't have a good answer for that. I will say, because the county needs to apply to the state for CDBG funds, we are limited in how much funding, how many open grant funds we can have at any one time. So I think it's like $2.25 million, which in the general broad construction budget scheme isn't a huge amount. It is something that the housing fund could potentially take care of, but then it's really, there's a whole bunch of other stuff we could fund too. So, we don't have a good answer for that. Is what I'm saying
Understood.
here.
And then it would just, and you don't have to comment on this, but it also seems like, you know, a lot of the nonprofit housing providers, they raise funds and get funds from all types of different sources. And it seems like a lot of that would be dry, and things that are federal would be drying up as well. And so they would also be in tougher situations for the next 4 years at least.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of concern all over,
Right.
about what could potentially happen.
Before you move on, can you just help just open up a little bit what cash in lieu payments and developer proffers? What's the difference between those?
There isn't any. I just forgot to take one of them out, so that's.
So
fine.
they are the same.
They are.
Oh, thank you. You were causing, I was sort of, I have all these notes like, well, maybe it's this, maybe that, maybe it's this. I was struggling, so thank you for.
No, that was my brain struggling
Oh,
to
well, no,
remember
thank you
to
for the
delete
cognitive
one of the
dissonance while
two.
I was reading this, but it was pretty rough.
I apologize for that. So included in your packet is our draft guidelines for an affordable housing trust fund. It's really turning the Affordable Housing Fund into an annual competitive application process. Through that, the Office of Housing would put out a request for proposals. And then there would be a review committee that would come together to review those applications based on a scoring matrix. They would be, the funds would be provided as a mix of grants and loans. Grants would be specifically for nonprofit developers or any for-profit developers that were providing 100% affordable housing. And then the grants could be both for-profit or nonprofit. It's proposed to provide those as 2% simple interest loans. Right now, just because we needed to put a repayment term in there, it was 60 months. That can be changed. It was just a draft. There will be a portion of the fund reserved for emerging needs. Those could be anything. So it could be mall side apartments going up for sale. A nonprofit is pooling together partners to potentially purchase the property, and that could be one of those emerging needs. It could be something like Cavalier Crossing being sold to a for-profit developer, and they choose to just not renew leases for all 500 residents that are in there. And it could be used to provide security deposit assistance for lower income households that have to move. There would also be a fund oversight committee created. They would act as the review committee for the funding applications that come in. Again, they would score those against a matrix, and those scores would then be taken to the board for recommendations for funding. The Board of Supervisors would always have the final say in what gets funded and what does not. And that brings me to the end.
I feel like
And
these
do you have
questions are
any more
probably-
questions?
This was your time for questions, gentlemen.
Time.
Yeah.
Can you just remind us, you said this, I apologize, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, where did the funds come from?
So cash in lieu payments,
Okay,
when those come through.
that's the dedicated, okay, got it.
Yes, that's dedicated. Also a portion of property tax revenue,
Got it.
which is like
Is-
I don't, or 0.0 some amount. It came out to be $1.2 million in FY '26.
Is this the program that Impact was promoting?
The half a cent, I can't remember. I know what you're talking.
It's okay.
Impact was always asking for this. There's a lot of community advocates
Okay.
for this.
That's what I thought, yeah. Thanks.
Yes, I had a question on, so Michael, you mentioned that you had seen an increase in applications. Or you're seeing it, I think you said increase, but
Well, I think what I was worried about, talked to you a little bit ago, a couple months back, it was like we had a real wall.
right, that we may not because of so of course, are you seeing that they are also looking to push the boundaries on the density? I mean, it's density. I would just like to get a sense on what are we seeing from their density? How far are they willing to go? How far are we willing to go?
Yeah, no, some of these projects we're talking about, they're too premature to sort of like, I think really talk about what's going on.
Well, just
Individual
in
pro-
general,
but
I'm specific. about-
Broadly speaking, yeah, I can think of several projects that we have, where they're talking about large multifamily buildings. Or, yeah, I'm thinking of ones, a lot of over under duplexes on kind of a challenging site. But they really try, there's a lot of grade on the site, they're really trying to pack it in. So I think we are seeing the development community try to, bring in relatively dense projects.
Hmm.
Be interesting to see what we start to get.
Yes.
Mhm.
And we have that giant white elephant of Fashion Square Mall,
Hmm.
the failed mall and all that real estate. Just thinking about how much housing could go above that mall.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Dr. Pethy. This is really helpful. Michael, thanks for arranging this training session too.
Yeah,
This is great.
it was fun to sit here and listen to the discussion. You guys asked some great questions. I think this is an interesting model we'll try and bring back for other topics.
Absolutely.
That was really helpful, and I really was excited to learn about the housing trust and how far, and now what they're doing with rentals and everything. That's really cool.
All right, we'll move on to committee reports. Any committee reports? Mine were canceled for the month. No, no, no. All right, review of Board of Supervisors meeting.
Yes, we've had one meeting between, this meeting and the previous one that we had, and that was June 4th with the board. The afternoon, they, discussed the cultural, chapter, the AC 44 cultural chapter. Quite a lot of discussion on that. A lot of discussion about historic preservation and sort of this bumping up of trying to make it a priority to, you know, provide support with county resources. There's a lot of discussion about that, ARB guidelines. It's an interesting conversation. I think that the board may have looked at some of those things a little bit different than you all did when it first came through. We're still trying to work and discern what that all means, but it was an interesting conversation. I'll just leave it at that. That evening, we had two public hearings. The first was for the Living Earth School off of Red Hill, and that was approved unanimously by the board. And then we had a very interesting meeting on the Woolen Mills industrial property. You'll recall that was off Franklin Street and the one that was still in the floodplain. Ultimately, that failed on a vote for approval, because it was a tie vote 3-3. And broadly speaking, it was interesting. We spent a lot of time talking about the details of the flood stuff. And so on this particular one, I think if it's not clear, staff really tried to make a presentation to the board to make sure they understood this element of the floodplain. You recall that this is on Morse Creek. It empties into the Ravanna, fairly close by. And I'm not an engineer, but I'm trying to explain it to you briefly. Basically, the Morse Creek drainage is fairly small relative to the Ravanna drainage. So you get a rain event, it covers the area, Morse Creek rises and falls. But the Ravanna, which is a much bigger floodplain, takes longer to hit that flood stage mark. So by the time the Ravanna flood is coming down and it gets to Woolen Mills, it's creating what they're calling a backwater condition. You almost have the water backing up Morse Creek. So the floodplain there is in many respects dictated more by Ravanna than it is the Morse Creek. And as a result, you got a lot of relatively slow moving water in this area. So that kind of led into this whole thing of, well, you can place the fill and it doesn't really directly impact adjacent properties. And I think that was seen as a favorable factor. I think it was seen as a favorable factor to try and increase, expand the amount of industrial land in the community and provide jobs in this area. I think those were sort of favorable factors. At the end of the day, I think it was a concern of the environmental services that were provided by the floodplain, as well as impacts to the adjacent property owners, especially during the fill operation, sort of stuff on the streets. I think those were seen as sort of the factors against, and the board voted accordingly.
Really an interesting discussion. It was a tie, 3-3.
Wasn't it?
Tie doesn't.
Yeah,
count.
yeah, I know that. I know, but.
You need to have an affirmative vote. So the motion was to approve,
Right.
and it didn't pass because it was a 3-3.
It was a 3-3,
It was
right?
Pruitt, Andrews, and Malik that voted against.
Oh, was it?
And reminder, we were 4-3.
Or 4-3? Yeah.
4-3.
Recommending approval.
I mean, yeah.
But it's a tough application. Obviously, lots of different ways to look at it.
Interesting. All right, new business, I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Did
No,
you
that's
cover
good.
it all?
We go to new business, actually.
New business, old business, items for follow-up? I know you have one.
Yes, please. So as we work to wrap up AC 44, we're in the process, we've gone through the topic chapters, and we're trying to really bring the rest of the document to you all. And so our intent was to come at our next meeting on the 24th of this month, June 24th, with a work session to sort of to provide you the documentation of part one, which is kind of the introductory section of the chapter. Part two, which is growth management policy, and then a lot of the stuff that's in, I'm gonna call it part four, is the appendix, a lot of the plans, just sort of, not that wouldn't be exciting reading for you all, but you've seen a lot of it already. But you know, it's our idea to like, where there's been changes and tweaks as we've gone, we sort of to get that out into the community. But the fourth part of the thing we're gonna bring to you was, sort of, it's gonna bookend these 9 chapters that we've been writing about, the topic chapters, and this is about implementation.
Mhm.
And we want to make sure we get that aspect right. And as we've been working through it this week, we really feel like we want a little bit more time to tweak that chapter. So respectfully, see if we could take a vote today to cancel the meeting on the 24th and move that work session item to the 8th. And I believe, I know, especially bringing this you all late, I know we start our work sessions at 4 o'clock. I believe some of you may have conflicts already, so my recommendation would be to start at 6 on the.
And we have
I
one.
was able to check with my staff during the meeting, and I learned that I don't have that conflict.
I believe at least we have one conflict, and
Okay.
so.
I just
I will leave that to you all if you wish to just start at 4, but you know,
There's one public hearing item, right?
there is one public hearing that evening. It's Brook Hill, you know, the large subdivision up on 29 is rezoning their town center to take out some commercial uses and put more residential
Residential.
uses into it. So that's
Seems
kind
like
of-
it's a
Our
trend.
favorite topic.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
we're gonna take out commercial. We're not gonna have light industrial, but we're gonna have more houses. So you'll be able
Sounds
to
really
live here,
familiar.
live here, but you can't work here.
so we have 2 potential motions. The first one is to cancel the meeting on the 24th. And the second one, just to have in mind, is to
I don't, do they
adjourn
need
till-
to have a motion to actually,
We,
they need a motion to cancel the one. Do they need to have a motion to move this item to the 8th? I don't think so.
Don't need to do that. We just cancel.
For cancel.
Yes, we
Yes,
just
we would
adjourned
go,
to
we
the
would
later
want to go
meeting.
ahead and make that a motion as well because we're amending the previously approved calendar.
oh,
Got it.
Well,
Okay.
Just to be, that's fine. I'm happy to do it. To be clear, the one on the 8th is a regularly scheduled meeting.
But it's an amendment of the start time.
No, it's 6.
We'll start at 6.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought that was being moved forward from 6 to 4. Okay.
We thought about that, but.
They were going
there
the
was
other way
some
around
other-
from 6, yeah, there was to move it from 6 to 4, but I think if we leave it at 6,
somebody can't come at 4.
Yeah.
I can.
So
not
again,
right.
apologize for this confusion and thank you for accommodating
We
our
have to
need.
moving.
We also have 2 other members who we don't know whether they can come at 4 or not,
Right.
so we'll just go with that. So, okay, so one motion, and that is to cancel the June, another J month, there's a few of them. June 24th meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
Didn't hear who seconded.
Commissioner Murray?
I said so moved.
Yeah, I heard Ms. Firehawk.
Oh, and Lonnie seconded.
No discussion. Could we have the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana.
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk.
Aye, aye.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all.
Counselors, we're good, right?
And will our gracious secretary take that, to make that change on our calendar? She usually removes those dates.
Or
We'll,
she'll
we'll
cancel.
make sure we cancel the
Thank
meeting.
you so much.
I will do it right now.
Great.
Day.
Any other items on new business, old business, or items for follow-up?
No, thank you.
All right, sir, thank you. So with that, I will adjourn us until July 8th at 6 PM. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, Chair.